Hello and welcome to Kickback Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Luke. This podcast is your place to get the tools and knowledge necessary to navigate the world of health and wellness. So kick back and let's talk science. This is good content. This stuff has gone crazy. We'll jump into it.
Let's dive in. Let's do a little science.
I'm going nitty-gritty science right now.
I've been looking forward to this.
Kind of going on a little bit of a tangent.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
The information we discuss in this podcast is not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is simply informative. We're not affiliated with any organization or institution, just a few guys talking science and having fun.
Good morning. Right here. Good morning, Joe.
I like these mornings.
I do too.
It's kind of nice.
Yeah, Sunday I'm usually not doing anything.
No.
It feels good.
Wake up from a long day of doing nothing to going into doing something.
Hey guys, we're always productive. Oh, that reminds me, in one of the episodes, well, we'll cover that actually in a second.
We'll cover that all later.
We'll cover that.
Welcome back for another episode of Kickback Science Podcast. I'm your co-host, Reed, with Dr. Luke and behind the scenes, Joe.
Hello again.
What's up, guys?
Welcome back,
I missed
guys.
you.
Yeah, I missed you guys too.
Is that going to be a thing? We miss each other?
Yeah, like I just always miss you, and I want I want the world to know.
For part 2 on this series, we're going to do the vegan versus carnivore. The first episode, we talked about the vegan diet. So if you haven't tuned into that one yet, make sure you listen to that before you decide, too, who
It's a
wins the
solid
matchup.
episode.
It's a great one.
And at the end, Dr. Luke is going to pick the winner. So let's dive into it.
All right.
Sweet.
Yeah. So, like you said, literally complete opposite of going vegan. Now you're going carnivore. And so it's literally just eating animal products. So you're having meat. You can have eggs. And there are some, like, you see people on carnivore diets saying they can, like, have some dairy as well, but that seems to be very limited in most of these carnivore diets, is limiting dairy intake. So mostly meat, and then organs. You also see people eating organs and bone marrow and everything that comes from the animal. So just avoid plants and really fruits and vegetables, because apparently they're poisonous.
Poisonous.
Yeah.
Is it from the pesticides?
Well, you know, that's one part of people's argument, is the plants that we have now constantly being genetically modified, sprayed with pesticides and all this. But, like, that's been happening for so freaking long. And think about it this way. If these pesticides, herbicides, and everything that's sprayed on fruits and vegetables had such a poor impact on your health, why would we see people who eat more fruits and vegetables being so much more healthy over and over again? Okay, like, it's there's one really well done study that divides two different groups of, like, high saturated fat and low saturated fat intake, and they've got them into a low vegetable to high vegetable arm in both groups. So you've got low saturated fat, low vegetables, and high meat intake. And then the inverse, low saturated fat, but you're having high meat, low vegetables. And then opposite of, like, high saturated fat with low vegetables, high meat. And it's kind of confusing. We'll have to pull up a chart for this. But essentially what they found was that in the groups that had higher vegetable intake, it didn't matter if they were eating meat or not, they tended to be much healthier versus groups with low vegetable intake. So there was a low vegetable intake, high meat, and they had much poorer health. And that gets back to, like, the vegan thing too, of, like, okay, there's clearly evidence to suggest that you can eat as much meat as you want as long as you're having fruits and vegetables as well. But that totally just, you know, gets at this carnivore diet of, like, okay, we see over and over again that increasing fruit and vegetables is beneficial for your health. So this whole argument against it just baffles me.
So why are plants poisonous then?
So there are these, like, animal studies of different components. Like, these phytochemicals that we talked about in the vegan diet, there's certain ones that have shown a negative impact on nutrient absorption in animals. So there are animal studies. And the 3 phytochemicals that you hear a lot about are oxalates, lectins, phthalates, and tannins. Those 4 things you'll hear over and over and over about how they can have such a negative impact. And they're the plants, the process, the plant's protecting itself and it's poisonous for us. There's a reason the plant uses it. It's to poison us so that we don't eat it. And that's a bunch of BS.
Oh, you're going to say bullshit.
Yeah, well, I was going to, but, for the kids. But, like, for example, like oxalates. People are like, oh, the plants are really high in oxalates, like especially spinach, and that causes kidney stones. And it's true. You can get this oxalate calcium kidney stone with really high amounts of oxalate. And this was shown in animal studies. But the amount that you would actually have to take it, like you would have to eat like a pickup truck full of spinach to even meet that level. And the same goes for the other phytochemicals that are talked about. So sure, a plant has this ability to defend itself, but it's not poisonous to us, And this would suggest that, like, let's take an herbivore out in nature, for example, an animal that eats just plants, like
a cow.
Why are they not dying from all this stuff? What would happen if you switched, them to a carnivore diet? If these plants are so harmful, like why do herbivores exist, and why are we not all just dying?
So
boom, shut down. We're done.
Mic drop. So for the carnivore diet, can you kind of explain like what all goes in? Is this like a lifestyle change? Is this something you do long term, or is this something you do for like a month, 2 months, half a year?
Yeah, this is typically it's, the way these extreme diets work is you get this, cult-like following of people based on just anecdotal data saying this changed my life and I got rid of my autoimmune disease. You hear that with this diet, and then everyone else hears it and starts doing it. And then you start to think like, oh, this is the cure to cancer. And, and so, wait, what was your question?
I was just kind of like breaking down what the carnivore diet is. Like, what's the time frame of it? So, and, like, is it a lifestyle change, or is it just for a month to get like your cells back regenerative, kind of like the juicing diet, kind of things like that?
No, this is, when you get these diets that have these cult-like followings, it's set up to, try to convince you that this is the only way to eat, and this, it's something that you would sustain for the rest of your life. If you're going to keep switching, just completely going like vegan to carnivore to all these like different diets, I mean, that could be pretty metabolically difficult on your body. But the premise of the carnivore diet is to get people to do it forever.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you hear like Paul Saladino on the Joe Rogan podcast, and there's a lot of these like people that are really, really passionate about the carnivore diet and how plants are poisonous and are preaching this, saying that you should never eat plants again.
And Rogan has a big following.
Yeah.
And is kind of a
Which
of a big
I
deal.
appreciate having people with these different opinions, so we can just call them idiots on our podcast. Yeah. Well, no, like so, like
coming.
Well, Paul Saladino, like you listen to this guy talk about how these different components of plants, which I just was explaining, like are so poisonous, and it's bullshit. And he picks out these mechanistic things like, oh, this is in plants and this causes this to happen in animals. Like he's got one about the like a component of broccoli that impacts iodine that would then impact thyroid function that would cause hypothyroidism, and like draws these lines of like, okay, yeah, that's true mechanistically, but you're forgetting to address everything else that has an impact on all these things in your body. You can't just say that happens, but that's what occurs. And I can say that about anything. I can say that about meat. There's products in meat that you can find at high concentrations cause cancer, like heme iron. Like, okay, Paul, did you know that heme iron, when you have a ton of that, can cause cancer? Like, it's just like you pick up these mechanistic...
Get him.
Well, you pick up these mechanistic things, and then he's like so anti-fiber. That's a big claim, and most of these carnivores are anti-fiber. I mean, we've got a few things in nutrition research that we know to be pretty evident, fiber being one of them. I don't understand the claim.
We just talked about in part 1 that fiber is shown consistently to be good for you.
There's like a linear relationship. More fiber, less death.
Boom.
But with the carnivore
Paul,
diet,
you're ignoring the evidence.
Yeah. But with the carnivore diet, you don't get any fiber. So
exactly.
what does that do to your bowel movement?
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean,
Probably not feeling too good.
Ask people who went on the carnivore diet what happens to their bowel movements.
My sister, I'm not going to say her name. She has Crohn's, and she mentioned that the carnivore diet is actually good for Crohn's with the anti-inflammatory aspects of it. What do you got to say about that?
So when people say this autoimmune thing, so when people suggest that it reduces inflammation, this is all like, you don't see that consistently in the literature. I mean, there are papers that show that an increased meat intake increases inflammation. And inflammation is such a broad measurement too. I mean, we throw it around quite a bit. But if that were to be true, you would see consistently that a increased meat intake would decrease inflammation across the board. And the thing with Crohn's disease and celiac disease and people latching on to this like idea that increased meat intake cured their autoimmune issues, I don't know of any study that has shown this. This is, again, all anecdotal. And that's what Paul Saladino, he's a psychiatrist, first of all. And he has a bunch of people that come to him and say like, oh, it cured this. That's because he's the person that everyone goes to that tries this diet. And so that's not research. That's just people's claims. Now, I can find the exact opposite and say, an increased fiber intake has actually shown to improve levels of inflammation and aid in autoimmune issues. So that's like, the complete opposite claim. I know I'm getting kind of heated on this one, guys.
Going after Paul.
But yeah, because I keep seeing that circulate around.
I can already tell which one
card.
he's going to pick. I have a feeling. Well, maybe he might surprise us.
We'll see who
you don't know what I'm going to
I don't know what he's going to pick.
So eating a lot of meats increases your cholesterol levels. Can you kind of go into that a little bit? Is that going to be bad for all your cholesterol, eating all that meat? Or what are like the risks associated with eating carnivore diet?
So if we're talking like just cholesterol specifically, if you're having leaner cuts of meat with lower saturated fat, you're not going to get as high of an increase in LDL numbers.
So stay away from the fatty meats.
Right. You do get, when you have that increased fatty meat intake, you are going to get an increase in LDL concentration. LDL is one of the lipoproteins in your body that transports cholesterol molecules. It does other things too. And LDL specifically, those particles individually are what, when you have damaged, they're called endothelial cells that line your blood vessels. LDL particles are able to get into these layers of those or past the endothelial cells into these layers of the blood vessels, and then they become oxidized and release all these inflammatory markers within the blood vessels, and that causes those blood vessels to become much less able to respond to blood flow. We could go on a whole side tangent on that, so try to bring it down that. But so essentially, LDL particles, when we look at those increasing, you're at more risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, that is one area of research that we've shown time and time again, and that's why you hear so many people. Cardiovascular disease is the number one cause of death globally, and LDL increase is one of the largest impacts on that, along with like hypertension, high blood pressure. And so with an increase in LDL, you get an increase in this damage to your blood vessels, decreased blood flow, can cause things like heart attacks, strokes, and yada, yada, yada. So with the carnivore diet, meat tends to be pretty fatty. If you're having an increase in this fat, you will see an increase in LDL. This is pretty heavily studied. And so, yeah, you could then draw the conclusion of like increased cardiovascular risk with it. That has not been done, however. And I want to highlight that especially because I don't want to sit here and say the meat consumption is causing cardiovascular disease, because there are so many papers, which we'll talk about in the other podcast, of how it's not actually meat in general. It's just when you're having this increase in saturated fat specifically, which you could have the same effect if you're doing a vegan diet high in saturated fats.
Where do you get saturated fat from? Majority of it. So
saturated fats are the fats that stay solid at room temperature. These are things like butter and fat content that's on the meat, versus unsaturated fats, more like oils and things that are liquid at room temperature. Saturated fats have shown to be the most heavily influenced fat on cardiovascular risk, whereas polyunsaturated fats over and over and over again have shown to some papers showing that they're actually beneficial for your health. And we'll do a separate podcast, I think, on just like fats, oils, and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, you'll hear carnivore diet people talk about saturated fats and how it's not unhealthy, or it's not unhealthy. Like it's beneficial for you. Don't worry about LDL and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of crazy considering the amount of evidence that we have suggesting LDL. And LDL itself is a ridiculous metric. Most of the time when you go into the doctor, you get an LDL concentration, but it doesn't actually tell you particle number. Having more particles in your blood of LDL is actually what influences, not just the concentration in a blood draw that you see on your blood test. But again, we'll save that for another podcast.
What are the other risks associated with going carnivore diet?
So the biggest thing with going carnivore is that you're missing out on fiber. And so with the decreased fiber intake, we know that has an effect on your overall health. And I'd say that's the biggest thing. I mean, you're also going to be deficient in things like vitamin C. People getting scurvy, which is vitamin C deficiency disease. Did you say James Bond?
James Blunt.
Oh,
maybe
like,
James Bond also.
In the movies, he had scurvy. Yeah, no, like, and you see this in populations of the world that don't have high levels of vitamin C getting this disease, and you see it in a carnivore diet as well, being deficient in vitamin C. But really, the big thing is the effect that or the lack of fiber that you're getting in this diet.
Talking about eating all this meat, right? A lot of people say it's really positive. Why is there so much positivity wrapped around the carnivore diet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you can find that with any diet, really. Like, people are going to respond well, and the premise really comes down to, like, it's totally individual. But what I hypothesize as being the reason that some people have a positive outcome is because of an elimination. It's an elimination diet. You're basically doing what people do when they go in to test for food allergies. There's a diet called a FODMAP diet, which gets rid of these short chain carbohydrates and tests to see, does your body respond well to them, because people have poor reactions to certain foods. And when you switch to a carnivore diet, you're getting rid of a bulk of those foods that people tend to respond poorly to. And so you're essentially doing an elimination diet. But you can't sit there and say, it's the meat that's helping me, or it's the plants that I got rid of that is making it, better for me. It's all the other things too. You look at what people eat in a given week, you're consuming 100 different types of food, and now you're getting rid of all of them but one. You can't sit here and tell me, like, it's the one thing that you kept in your diet that's helping you, or it's one of these 99 other things.
It's not a proper elimination diet. You're just like, let's throw all of these out and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have a reduction in inflammatory markers if you are in the population of people who respond poorly to certain short chain carbohydrates and certain foods that, like with celiac disease, for example, like if you switched to carnivore and got rid of gluten and you had celiac but didn't know it, so celiac is a inability to digest gluten, and it's an autoimmune disease. And if you got rid of gluten and went carnivore, it's the gluten that causes, not because I'm not eating plants anymore and I'm only eating meat. You know what I mean?
You can't decipher what exactly it was.
Exactly. So if we had to, I guess, put this into, well, first of all, do you guys have any more questions about it?
Resistance training, compared to vegan. Do you see
nice.
improvements going carnivore? I mean, I feel like it would be obvious because you're having more protein that's going to synthesize inside your muscles and grow bigger. But do you see any decreases? Kind of like doing a cold plunge is not good for your muscle growth. Do you see increases in resistance training and muscle growth?
So the problem is this diet hasn't been studied extensively. But if you think like mechanistically here, you're having such high amounts of protein, and high amounts of protein are what's necessary for protein synthesis. So you would in no way be deficient in protein if you went on a carnivore diet. And sure, you would be able to induce protein synthesis pretty well, but you're not going to be healthier.
What about energy? Carbohydrates give you that instant energy. If you're going to go lift and you're just on carnivore, are you going to have the same amount of readily available energy?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about carbohydrates is your body can actually create them. So your liver does what's called gluconeogenesis, creating new glucose. And so you really don't have to take in glucose for your body to make it. And so if you went on a carnivore diet, it's similar to what happens when you go on a keto diet. You start to increase gluconeogenesis, and you can keep your blood glucose levels pretty steady. In that, if you're metabolically healthy. So you wouldn't really be missing out on glucose concentration at first, likely, because your body hasn't shifted to that state of, being efficient at producing glucose. But over time, you would be able to replenish your muscles' glycogen stores. You'd be able to replenish circulating glucose levels, which is what comes from carbs.
Crazy.
Science is cool.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
So I'm reading here in this article, it says it helps regulate your circadian rhythm. I know you're a big circadian rhythm.
That's hilarious.
So is there any truth to that?
So for the audience, my PhD dissertation was studying circadian rhythms, and I reviewed paper after 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 paper, and oh man, that was
got rid of it.
It was a lot of research goes into writing a dissertation. For those of you that know, I feel for you. And nope, not one time did I see anything about red meat consumption and circadian rhythm. So yep, you can. That is an area that I am of high expertise and can confidently say no. Whoever wrote that article, they can revoke it.
It also talks about delays in aging. Have you seen anything that benefits that at all? Because that's a huge thing. Is people trying to look younger and younger. Like, could this benefit if they do this diet? Will they look younger?
Will they look younger?
Or feel younger?
Feel younger, look
That's such
younger.
a hard measurement. Like it delays age.
Well, you just said there's not that much research on it.
Right. And if you're going to say, I feel like that all comes back to the anecdotal data of like, I felt better when I switched to this diet. It's because you're going on a restricted diet and like you're eating less calories, you're losing weight. Because, okay, try eating just meat versus eating all these other things that come with a standard American diet, like potato chips and cookies and all this stuff. Like, you're going to be fuller faster, just like what happens with a vegan diet. You're going to lose weight. You're going to feel better because you're calorically restricted, not because you're eating meat. So yeah, I mean, I could see an impact on how you feel specifically because of the caloric restriction, but long term, I just worry about that lack of fiber intake.
Yeah. I need to supplement some fiber into my life.
Yes, absolutely.
I should probably do that.
Yeah, we'll have a podcast just on fiber as well.
So like a fiber supplement, is that plant?
Yeah, I mean,
what about like Metamucil?
Metamucil, I mean, like the fiber is derived from a plant.
Okay.
And you got to look at if you have soluble and insoluble fiber, because your body needs both types of fiber. And again, we're not going to go into detail on all this of like what it is, but it is important. Your gut needs to be able to create this mucus layer and be able to provide nutrients for the bacteria that line your gut. It's really important. And it is important to have the proper amount of both soluble and insoluble fiber in order to do that.
So what are your thoughts basically with this carnivore diet?
So I think the carnivore diet is one of the most outrageous stuff. Like, I used to not understand the vegan diet, and now I'm starting to understand it a little bit more, especially with like the ethical reasons of it. And I respect people that choose to do it. However, I based on the research, it is not beneficial for your health. Certain people will respond well. And I want to highlight that with all these diets. People will respond well to certain diets, but not everybody will. So if you feel great on a vegan diet, stick with it. By all means, stick with it. If it's easy for you to do, do it. If it is not easy for you to do, stop by all means. Adherence is going to be the most important thing. Can you adhere to this diet? But then you get into diets like the carnivore diet, where it's like, even if you do adhere to it, I'm not convinced that it is having any health benefit other than initially if you're having reduced calorie intake. So, I mean, if we're going to jump to like the head-to-head combat of the two, me personally, if I had to choose, and I hate these like dichotomous decisions, but if I had to choose between the two, first of all, I would obviously do neither, but I would choose the vegan diet over the carnivore diet. Reason being,
I was thinking the same thing.
I'm not going to, mess around with limiting my fiber intake. And with a vegan diet, the evidence is clear. If I can supplement correctly, so get a blend of different pea, soy, corn, protein, so that I have the proper essential amino acids, I'm not impairing muscle protein synthesis because I'm increasing my protein level, and I'm making sure that I get vitamin B12 intake. I'm confident that my nutrition profile can be just as healthy as if, any other diet. However, that's going to be so hard for me to do. And so I know I'm going to fail that diet if I try it. And that's why I wouldn't.
I mean, I tried an anti-inflammatory vegan style diet.
Yeah.
And I was definitely really malnourished. My face was green. I swear to you, I went to a meeting at work and they were like, "Joe, are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm doing this diet.
I don't have
now,
inflammation."
and I am definitely malnourished. And they're like, "Yeah,
Wow.
You look like crap." And my energy was low, but I didn't understand the protein like I do now and how much more protein I needed to take in. I was just telling Reed a little bit ago, I was going to have to eat like a cow and just graze all day just to get enough calories.
Yeah.
And it was just, oh God.
See,
I couldn't do it.
And
I couldn't.
It's people like you who are focusing on their health. You want to, like, you do stuff all the time just to try it out and try to be healthy.
Yeah.
It's health conscious people that are wreaking all these, negative impacts of people that are in this, like Paul Saladino. I keep throwing him under the bus. I'm sorry, Paul. But sorry, not sorry. So like you get people that latch onto these ideas and are they have such a high following and are supposed to be highly respected people that are, okay, he's a psychiatrist, an MD, and you've got so many different MDs you'll see online. So doctors, after going through all the coursework in medical school, I've seen you don't know nutrition unless you've studied it outside. You don't learn nutrition. Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have had the PhD where we studied different aspects of exercise physiology and nutrition, but that, most physicians don't have that. And so it's not fair when you keep hearing all these people that sound so credible and use these big words like inflammation and these scientific like mitochondria, and you hear it and they're like, wow, this person is a doctor and they obviously know what they're talking about. And then you listen to them and you respond poorly. And if you respond great, again, stick with it. But yeah, it's just a dangerous, dangerous world out there.
That's super interesting. I totally thought you would have gone carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Taking the dub on this one. But
yeah. I mean, the review of research, it's pretty clear.
I mean, remember Atkins diet?
Yeah.
And people were having heart attacks all the time. That was I thought that was the same as carnivore, but it's not. That was just like, I guess that was a no carb diet. So you could have red meat. It was like all red meat, and then vegetables and fruits and stuff. So
we'll do we're gonna do a low carb versus low carb, high fat, and then a high fat, low carb.
we're gonna do a lot.
Oh,
Wait,
There's a lot
I just
of
said the
diets.
same thing. We're gonna do a low carb, high fat,
I know
and
what
then a
you're
high
saying,
carb, low fat duo.
I think you did it again. I don't know.
Wow, it's all right. You get what I'm saying.
I'm dyslexic, so
Low carb versus high carb, low fat versus high fat. Anything else, fellas?
So I also saw this study. It's talking about a lion diet. Have you heard of that? It's like time restrictive carnivore diet. So you're not eating for 16 hours, but you have that 8-hour gap of eating. And
Is this is this the article that you saw anything about
It's a
circadian rhythm?
It's the same exact article.
Is it?
It's got
okay.
it all.
Okay, that sounds like something someone would claim circadian rhythm on. And the reason being the 16/8. So Sachin Panda, he's down in California at the Salk Institute. He's kind of pioneered this circadian rhythm, time restricted feeding, and the idea that so your circadian rhythm regulates sleep-wake cycle, it regulates activity and inactivity, it also regulates like feeding and fasting. So those three things have an influence on your circadian rhythm. So if you can eat at the same time in a given day, it'll, hypothetically influence circadian rhythm. Now, is that true or not? You'll have to tune in for the fasting time restricted feeding episode, and we'll talk more about that. But as far as like the carnivore diet trying to then influence time restricted feeding and what does that do? Now, that's just getting at two different diet approaches. So I don't want to spend a ton of time because we'll take away from the other episode there. But you're not changing any of the risks that come from meat. You don't just all of a sudden create fiber out of nowhere because you're fasting 16/8. You're still having the same effects. Sure, it might be a better way to do the diet.
Though, if you think about it, a lion eats not only the muscle tissues, but they also eat the intestines. So they're probably getting fiber from the animal they're eating. You never know.
Yeah, if they catch it before it's all broken down.
Yeah.
A lot of the carnivore diet people will eat the whole animal, and that's kind of the idea. And it all comes from these like northern Arctic like Inuit populations that didn't have access to plants, and they're just eating like whale meat and animals, and they never got scurvy or anything. They were healthy, and everyone does this. They compare us to like older populations and stuff, and say like, this is how we were supposed to eat. It's like, we've been around for so freaking long and changed diets so often and had so much influence, and like we would all just die, right? Why are we living a lot longer now, by the way? Like, why do we like each generation increase age by about a decade if all of a sudden now what we're eating is so harmful? Why did people back there not live long at all? Like, do we just like feel like they for some reason knew how to eat, though, apparently? But
Much more
that's another
well-rounded now.
side tangent.
Absolutely. I'm also seeing in the same article that it can reduce arthritis, which is huge. A lot of arthritis. I mean, we've come a long way. I worked in a hand therapy clinic. Like, we've come a long way with arthritis. Like, people used to come in with rheumatoid arthritis and their hands were just kind of mushed up. So like, this would be a huge one. Like, do you see any research that says that it helps? I know there's not a lot on the carnivore diet yet, but like, have you seen anything that shows that arthritis will improve? Like, not like you'll get more arthritis, but like,
so
improve your arthritis symptoms.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I
so
didn't want you to take that the
right.
wrong way.
Yeah. No, now people will, again, like Paul Saladino's broccoli claim on thyroid issues. Like, people will jump on this idea of, it reduces inflammation, which you can find a paper on that, but it is not consistent, so I wouldn't say it does. If it reduces inflammation, therefore it's going to reduce arthritis, and therefore, it's going to reduce all these other inflammatory processes.
Just the inflammation is really what they're looking at,
like,
but then
because it reduces
anything that
inflammation,
has inflammation connotation.
Therefore, it reduces my risk of cancer, which another really, really, really funny thing is there's this paper that this guy, he's got a ABC or whatever, one of the news outlets. He does an interview, but he also wrote this paper that is absolutely hilarious. And his whole premise is to highlight how nutrition research is bullshit. Like, it is so poorly done in so many settings. It's all observational. People try to say causation of everything, which we'll get into when we talk the vegetarian diet and stuff. We'll talk about how how crazy that world is. But there's a paper this guy put together. There's a couple authors, but they took a cookbook, took 50 ingredients out of the cookbook, and then looked at, out of those 50 ingredients, let's look at each one. Can we find enough evidence suggesting that it causes cancer? And so 40 out of the 50, they were able to find enough research suggesting that there's a link between that and cancer. And people just you hear people say it all the time, like, oh, this reduces risk of cancer if you go all meat and stuff. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you can find that with anything in this paper. It is so funny. And they actually this is a peer-reviewed scientific published paper that they were like, oh yeah, 80% of the random ingredients they took out of a cookbook must cause cancer, which obviously isn't true.
So Luke went with the vegan.
Yeah.
What would you have done, Reed?
I honestly thought I would have done the carnivore diet for a month.
You would have gone carnivore?
For a month. I don't know if I can go all vegan.
I don't know. I mean,
my trigger would be really mad. Yeah.
See, that's the thing.
I'd be collecting dust.
Yeah.
And be mad.
I originally came in thinking doing the carnivore, but I feel like I would die from a heart attack from it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go vegan.
Vegan?
Which I would never do.
Got him.
Reed,
did you change your mind?
I still would go carnivore, but I'd only
just
do it for
you
a
like
month
meat,
and then go back to omnivore. Just kind of like.
Yeah, I got a coworker doing it, and he's all about it. He's like, oh, I'm gonna get ripped, lose all this weight. Yeah, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep doing my diet.
Yeah, that's if you can find something that, like Reed, you saying you could do it for a month, couldn't do it longer than that. Like, that's the point with all these. It's like, if Luke, it's so restrictive,
it's not long term.
Luke preaches adherence.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I haven't convinced Reed yet. I'll get him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe try 1 month of both and then incorporate it at the end. The third month, do kind of both, and you just have a healthy balance. That's if I had to choose one, I would do the carnivore diet.
We should do that, and then we can update the listeners and stuff. Like, Joe's on the vegan diet this month, and we keep checking it. Like, how does it feel?
Nope, not doing it.
I'd do it.
I'm not going vegan. I'll be the mesh of both.
I'm gonna do it.
You want to be the vegan?
Yeah, I'll do it for the listeners. So I'll do I'm not messing with this stupid You know what? I'll do it. I'll do the carnivore diet.
Carnivore? And
I'll just take a fiber supplement.
You do the vegan.
But if you're doing carnivore, you got to go
you chose vegan. You have to go vegan. You chose vegan. You chose carnivore.
Joe Rogan did it, but he also ate fruits.
He also got a bunch of diarrhea.
Yes, that's what I've been hearing too. Yeah. It's like, it's not good for 2 weeks, but it'll get better. Yeah, that's what they said.
Your body will tell you if it likes this diet or not.
Yeah, I'd rather not have diarrhea. I have it enough as it is.
So the winner in this matchup is vegan, according to Dr. Luke.
Congratulations, vegan. We'll see you next time when you go head to head.
Comment in the comment section which diet you would have chose. And maybe we'll put a poll together. And
we will, because we got to have a winner here. So
yeah,
let us know what diet you choose. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment for us. We'll be responding to comments.
Yeah, thanks for listening to Sunday Fun Day with all three of us.
I'll miss you guys.
See you guys.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Kickback Science Podcast. We love talking science with all of you, and if you feel the same, you can support us by subscribing, hitting that like button, and giving us a follow on our social media pages. Don't forget, you can submit questions through our website and in the comments section of all our social media. Have a good one, everyone.